It is 100 days of the Trump presidency, and if you are getting a little bit uneasy, oh, I wish there was more deportations. Where are the arrests? Where are this? I get it. We're here to air all those grievances. In fact, today is a day where we understand that it could be Festivus every day here on the Charlie Kirk Show. The airing of grievances. But what I will not tolerate is whining, complaining. Because all we have to do is look to the north. All we have to do is to look to our neighbor to say, you know what? We have it pretty good here. We have it pretty awesome. We have a president and administration every day that is fighting for the American people, and they're getting things together. They are reconfiguring the U.S. government to represent our country because, boy, what happened last night in Canada is awfully depressing. We're going to be spending almost the entire hour talking about what's happened in Canada and contrast it with what's happening here. There's a fair amount of people that just want to try to find something wrong with President Trump's administration. Oh, we shouldn't have deported that guy. A lot of should-haves, but time out, guys. Understand that we could have a Prime Minister Carney. We could have a catastrophe on our hands. Canada, being our neighbor to the north, has indulged the last 40 years in liberal government. And their decline is steep. 16 years. Huge explosion of housing prices. A incomprehensible immigration flood. Like hard to even grasp. And interestingly, the election last night, which was the election of Mr. Carney as Prime Minister, the patterns of what we're seeing in Canada are eerily similar to that in America. Get this. Canadians over the age of 60 and over are by far the most likely to vote for Carney because they thought he was good at dealing with Donald Trump. For younger voters, very similar to here in America, they wanted to reduce the cost of living. So I think I could be a little bit more candid because whenever I say anything about baby boomers, I get thousands of nasty emails as if people must be defensive of their generation like I'm attacking your family. It's very bizarre to me. But how about this? Canadian baby boomers don't care about the future of Canada. Now, if I get criticism from that statement, I will shrug my shoulders and laugh. You would think the way the West was built was with a intergenerational social compact. I, at age 60, am going to sacrifice for future generations. I might not have the life that I want, but my kids will, and that will give me satisfaction. That is how you build a country. That is how civilization improves. When you have delayed gratification, it's how you leave a legacy. And we saw a window into the perverse moral nature that now dominates the West. And Canada was way worse than America, but both of our countries were terrible during the lockdowns. During the lockdowns, we saw we will sacrifice the youth to save the old mantra. Very troubling. Few people isolated this and pinpointed this. And we kind of just all believed it. Yeah, we're going to ruin our kids' lives so that we can have a better 5 years. When has that ever been the case of a Western value? That is a soft form of child sacrifice. So we're going to have young people have a worse time off. They're going to be masked. They're going to be more suicidal. They're going to be more alcohol addicted, more drug addicted, more isolated, less likely to be part of a community. But hey, at least I'm making sure that I don't get COVID, even though it wasn't nearly the threat that people thought it was. Not even close. And in Canada, we saw with the results last evening, Mr. Carney defeated the Conservative insurgency, which had a massive lead just a month and a half ago. And to be honest, President Trump's issuing of tariffs against Canada helped the Liberal Party in Canada, which, interestingly, the Conservative Party very well should have positioned themselves as a way to benefit from it. But Canadian voters said, oh, Trump is a Conservative Party. We want to stay liberal. The amount of people that Canada is bringing in through mass migration will destroy Canada. Canada's already basically destroyed. It's 1 million people a year. Canada is literally falling apart. Its average home price is tens of thousands of dollars higher than here in America. Even though Canada has nothing but space and lower incomes than America, it is a choice. Look at now 100 days. 100 days of President Trump, the contrast and the difference. And you should be saying your prayers of gratitude today. Thank you, Lord, for saving us. Thank you, Lord, for giving us the grace, because Canada, we are going to be neighboring a semi-Soviet country soon. It's not an exaggeration. We have a border. We are putting the American worker first. And I've always said to reporters or people on campus, Charlie, what do you disagree with President Trump on? And I kind of jokingly but very seriously say, man, I don't want Canada as our 51st state. Why would we want this state? They're more to the left than even our most liberal state. Why would we want them as our 51st state? And now Canada is in a irreversible death spiral, held captive by environmentalism, mass migration, critical theory. It is every dynamic imaginable packaged. And we have Ezra Levant from Canada joining us later in this hour. He has a glass half full view of the election, so maybe it's not as bad as all that, but I'm here to tell you it's really bad. And I love the ever-present Canadian optimism of Ezra. But now we look at what President Trump has done and what's happening in our country. And it goes to show that this right-wing revolution is not happening in every state, every country, but it is happening in ours. And we made it happen, largely because free speech is our birthright. And everyday Americans rose up and gave us that mandate. Here's some of the polling that has happened within the first couple of days, the first 100 days of President Trump's term. Shows only 2% of Trump voters regret their vote, despite what all the media is saying. Play cut 175.
I hear all these stories, all these articles. All the Trump voters, they regret what they did back in 2024. I'm here to tell you, very few of them regret what they did back in 2024. What are we talking about? Trump voters looking back at 2024. We got a new poll out. The poll was conducted this month. What percentage would change their vote to a different candidate? We're talking just 2%, just 2%. That's not even a wide spot on the road. And then there's this additional 1% who say they would rather not vote. And then you ask, okay, the same question to Kamala Harris voters, and it turns out the numbers are rather similar. So if there was a repeat, if folks got to be able to redo their vote that they had back in 2024, would the result be any different? I doubt it would be.
We look to the north, and we should look to the north with gratitude that we've been saved, that we have a president and an administration fighting so hard. And our neighbors to the north, boy, they did not dodge a bullet. It metaphorically hit them square in the middle. We're going to dive deeper into the Canadian results here with my friend Ezra Levant from Rebel News. Ezra, great to see you. You actually have a glass half full interpretation of the Canadian election results. Tell us about it.
Thanks. I mean, you got to, if you're a conservative in a left of center country like Canada, you always got to be looking for the silver lining. And let me tell you what it is. The Conservative Party of Canada, led by Pierre Poilievre, got the highest vote count of the Conservative Party in a generation. The last time the Conservatives got this many votes, it was 1988. Trouble is, we have a multi-party system. It's not the U.S.-style two-party system. So Pierre Poilievre, the conservative, ran a working-class conservative campaign that focused on things like reducing immigration, reducing inflation, reducing the... It was actually something that I think American conservatives would like. Trouble is, the left-wing parties all joined together. So Pierre Poilievre got about 41.5%. And you're thinking, well, that's terrible, because in the two-party American system, it would be. But believe it or not, that's the highest any politician has got in Canada in 30 years. But the Socialist Party fell down to 6%. All of it went to the Liberals. The Green Party did a trick. They canceled over 100 of their candidates to stop splitting the vote. So what happened is the Liberal candidate, led by a World Economic Forum board member named Mark Carney, he squeaked past Pierre Poilievre, and he formed a minority government. What does that mean? He didn't get most of the seats in the parliament. So there's a chance we'll be going back to the polls sometime this year. It's not a disaster. It feels bad because as recently as 4 or 5 months ago, the Conservatives were looking to cruise to victory with a majority. But I'll be candid with you, Charlie, and you know me, I'm the biggest Trump booster in Canada. Donald Trump's heckling and his banter about the 51st state, that spooked some people who had thin skin or didn't understand what to make of it. And I think that probably drove 5 or 10% over to the Liberals. So glass half full is best Conservative result in a long time. The new Conservative Party is very attractive to young people and working class people. The bad news is the Liberals squeak past them. And I hate to say it, it was that Trump banter that hurt some feelings.
Yeah, so let's dive deeper into this and examine it. So first, that sounds like it was a French playbook, where there was, meaning in the France they did something similar, where the liberal parties kind of all combined together. I have to imagine, though, it's just a little bit different than American politics, where was it not cost of living and mass migration and cultural cohesion that was a bigger issue? Was this really a referendum on President Trump externally? I mean, walk us into the elements here.
Well, there was a generational divide, which was so interesting. Historically, the Liberal Party gets the young voters. Justin Trudeau won in 2015 in part on his promise to legalize marijuana. Trudeau tried to come across as young and hip and cool, and he got the young vote. This time around, young people really tilted towards the Conservatives for the reasons you say. It's tough to find a house you can buy in Canada. Mass immigration has driven down wages and pushed up housing costs. So immigration was the subtle driver of all, not so subtle driver of all these things. Crime is there's a huge crime wave in Canada. In many ways, we're now actually more violent than the United States, which has never happened before. And finally, we have big pro-Hamas street marches, things that, I mean, occasionally you see them in the United States, but they're a weekly thing in Canada. So yes, immigration was at play, but it was a generational thing. Young people feel a little bit hopeless. They can't buy a house. They can barely afford to get ahead. And they see that mass immigration is driving those things. Whereas boomers and seniors, they've already got their home paid off. So they don't care if house prices rise. That's good for them. They don't really pay income taxes because they don't work anymore. And I think that they're oblivious to some of the street battles in Canada over race and ethnicity, diaspora politics. So the boomers and the seniors could afford the luxury political belief of being offended by Donald Trump. Like, imagine that is driving your vote for your prime minister. Who's going to push back at Trump's heckles? That is not a serious reason to vote for someone, because that, like I say, it's a luxury belief you can only afford if everything else in your life is going right. Young people didn't really care about the Trump tweets, but boomers and seniors, especially liberal-minded boomers and seniors, they cared a lot.
So it's a luxury belief to be so offended at Trump that you can basically crap on your kid's future. And luxury beliefs are something we talk about a lot on this program. Okay, so you are rather hopeful, actually, about the future of Canadian politics based on your analysis and your interpretation. Just kind of let's take a step back. What does an election look like? Is there a lot of money being spent? How much money was spent on this? Was it campaigning across the country? I know that it was a rather truncated or a rather compressed election season. So educate us on what Canadian elections look like.
Canadian elections, there's a 5-week period where everyone goes full guns. Now, obviously, everything before that, there's sort of have the campaign in mind, but there's an intensity of those last 5 weeks. In Canada, the government has nationalized leaders' debates. So there was an official government-run leaders' debate halfway through, and typically people really pay attention to those. You know, there is a lot of money being spent. Canada's about 1/10 the size of the U.S., and we probably had 1/10 the size of the budget. But the campaigns have their campaign jets, and it's all about IDing your vote and get out the vote. Obviously, a lot of the campaigning is digital. So it's very much like an American campaign. In fact, the Liberals typically have campaign advisors from the Democrats. Let me tell you a quirky thing. Mark Carney and another candidate named Evan Solomon, they're basically run by a globalist lobby group in New York called the Eurasia Group. It's sort of weird how that it's in New York City, but it was sort of running the campaign for the Liberal Party in Canada. Justin Trudeau's former mentor works at the Eurasia Group, and that's where Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, his wife works. Like, this little office in New York is basically being the puppet master for Canada. It's a little bit weird. There's a lot of foreign interference in our election, I should mention. In the last election, the Chinese Communist Party was found to be interfering in 11 different districts. This election, it was even worse. In fact, one candidate had to step down because he was a Chinese-Canadian candidate who said, if you kidnap my opponent and take him to the Chinese consulate, you'll get $1 million bounty. I know what I said just sounded insane, but he said it 3 times, and finally he resigned as the candidate to be replaced by another Chinese Communist Party candidate, a police officer, Chinese-Canadian police officer, who would attend Chinese Communist Party events in his police uniform, sing communist songs. Like, the hand of China is very apparent in our politics. In fact, our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, you may know that he was the chair of Brookfield Asset Management, which is like a slightly smaller BlackRock. He's met with Xi Jinping. He's done huge business deals in China. He took a $250 million loan from China. So we have a real China problem in Canada. There are great, loyal, freedom-oriented Chinese Canadians fighting against that. But the Mark Carney government is as pro-China as you can get. Let me throw one last thing at you, Charlie. Canadian politicians were sort of heckling back at Donald Trump. I know you didn't hear it because it was for Canadian domestic consumption. It was sort of, can you prove who is the toughest to stand up to Trump? That was a campaign thing to juice the turnout that we talked about, those sensitive boomers and seniors. But last night, after the votes were counted, Mark Carney, the new Liberal Prime Minister, the former World Economic Forum board member, the former chair of Brookfield Asset Management, he takes the stage for his acceptance speech. Campaign's over now. Now he has to think like a prime minister. He goes extra hard at Donald Trump. He says that Canada and the US will never have the same relation again. He will reorient Canada. If he gets his way, he will realign us with communist China. So it wasn't just a campaign trick. It wasn't just a way, his anti-Americanism wasn't just a tactic. He deeply believes in it. This guy is the ultimate globalist. I think I told you before, he has 3 passports. He has a home in the United Kingdom, a home in New York City. I don't think he's actually been back in Canada for more than a few weeks. I flew to the Isle of Man 2 weeks ago because he had set up a shell company with a strawman director there. I don't even know what country he pays his taxes in. We are dealing with someone who truly is the World Economic Forum.
But I mean, just really quick though, and it's just, I have the 30 seconds. We'll pick it up after the break though. All of that is true. Then how was the Canadian polity so bamboozled by this guy? Is it because you don't have free speech and you don't have alternative media to be able to get this message out?
There's some anti-Americanism in Canada. Our media is so concentrated, it would be as if PBS was larger than all other media combined. That's our CBC state broadcaster. And I say again, despite all that, Pierre Poilievre did exceedingly well. It just wasn't good enough given the France-style trick you mentioned where they all unified behind the lefty. It was close though. The Liberal only beat the Conservative by 2%. So don't write us off yet, Charlie. That's why I'm not gloomy. Glass half full. I think Poilievre will win it within the next year and we'll be smiling again.
Can you talk and speak to the importance of what you wish you had as far as alternative media and free speech? What if Canada had so Canada's like the size of California. So just in California, imagine if you had free media, open media, alternative media, influencers, and laws that allow you to do those things. What would Canada look like?
It would be completely different. We are constantly fighting for even basic freedom of speech and freedom of the press, and it is a very costly battle because we do not have the First Amendment. We have something that's sort of a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy version of the First Amendment, but it's subject to so many limitations. We rely on it to fight back all the time. I mentioned earlier that there's a leaders' debate that the government runs here. That's weird in itself. But why would Trudeau nationalize debates? The answer is to choose who gets to attend, including journalists. Twice, Rebel News was banned from attending, simply because they didn't like our conservative tilt. Twice, we managed to go to the federal court and get a court order allowing us in. So the freedom of speech is there enough that occasionally we can win, but we're always running to the courts because there's a political culture that doesn't value free speech anymore. We have things called the human rights commissions, which are nothing of the sort. They basically weaponize any complaints that you're making mean tweets. Justin Trudeau introduced a terrifying bill called C-63, the Online Harms Act, that would have made it literally against the law to hurt people's feelings. And truth is not a defense. Fair comment is not a defense. Religious conviction is not a defense. That bill was sort of evaporated by the election, but I believe Mark Carney is going to reintroduce it. Let me tell you, freedom of speech is the most important freedom because with it, you can fight to recover all the others. It's a little bit tough sometimes, free speech, because you have to give it to your opponent if you want it for yourself. So you really have to love it because we all don't like what our critics say. But in Canada, they're snuffing out free speech. Last point, Charlie. It's not just that they have a stick to beat people they don't like. They have a huge carrot for the journalists they do like. They have colonized the media. I mentioned what would it look like if PBS was larger than all media combined. That's what Canada is like. We have a state broadcaster here that has a larger staff than all private media combined. Imagine how that distorts the debate. And whatever private media that there is now gets about $30,000 per journalist yearly subsidy from the government. So they're all pulling for Team Mark Carney. There's really only a handful of independent journalists left. So I think in Canada soon there'll only be government-funded journalists or government-banned journalists. It is not a healthy state of affairs. Elon Musk, frankly, is the most consequential man in politics because he has strengthened our freedom of speech. And thank God Donald Trump won because he's fixing the censorship problem in social media, which benefits us up here in Canada. If Trump did not win, Rebel News would be out of business because Twitter and the free speech that's now seeping back into social media would be gone.
In closing here, are you guys going to give up? Is now this, hey, the Liberals won? What is the battle cry for the Canadian patriot? Because I just have such respect for you guys because even though that, people in California say, Charlie, it's so bad here. I said, no. Go to Ontario, go to Toronto, go to Ottawa. Yeah. Are you going to give up? 1 minute remaining, Ezra.
No, I love this is my home. I mean, for generations, my family being here, this is my country. I'm not going to give it up without a fight. We fought during the COVID lockdowns, which were extreme up here. Remember the Canadian truckers?
Oh, of course
they came and they broke the fever and they set an example for the world. And remember, no politicians supported them. They didn't have a big super PAC behind them. It was grassroots people saying enough is enough. That inspires me, those truckers. So we're going to keep fighting. And again, I'm a glass half full guy. The Conservative leader of Canada got the highest vote that his party has received in a generation. I think that he'll break through next time. He's got a conservative working class coalition, including young people. It's pretty unique around the world. I think it can win. And I would just say to our American friends, don't give up on us. Don't annex us. You don't need to. You already have a free trade agreement that'll give you all the oil and gas and minerals you can buy. So you don't need to annex us. That spooked Canadians. That's frankly a reason why the Liberals eked out a win. But let's get back to being best friends. You can be Batman and we'll be Robin. We're the junior partner in the friendship. But let's be best friends again is what I have to say.
Ezra, God bless you, my friend. Hope to see you soon. It's a depressing picture from my view, but your optimism and positivity is remarkable and noteworthy. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.